Hello my friends, this is Lindy. Welcome to another Friday Reads. Our clocks went back this week. Many of you might have had the same experience. Those of you who are in the Northern Hemisphere and switch from daylight savings time to standard time. And I, for years, have been going to bed at 9 p.m., get up at 5 a.m. When I was still working, that gave me lots of time to read in the morning. I'm retired, I still like to get up early, but with the time change, now I'm waking up at 3:45 in the morning. It's a little early. Still adjusting. Last Saturday was my final class in a series that I did on printing with vegetable stamps using natural dyes. I will just show you another example of one of the pieces that I played with. This one uses a stamp that was carved from a daikon radish. I've got lots more experimenting to do. My table is still set up in the dining room. We're not eating there. I'm just doing crafts. Anyway, the most exciting thing this week was the announcement of the Giller Prize winner, and it is Suzette Mayer for Sleeping Car Porter. I am so pleased. This was the book that I was hoping would win, and it did, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. In Mayer's acceptance speech, it was so emotional, actually. And while she was talking, her wife Tanya, they showed her in the audience also crying. One of the things that Myers said is a final shout out to my LGBTQIA2S plus sisters, brothers, and siblings, many of whom, like my main character Baxter, are still too scared to come out or cannot come out because to do so would be dangerous. Yeah. Suzette Mayer and I share an X in common. I would guess that would be 1 degree of separation. But that is not the reason I'm so happy for her. I'm happy because this is such a good book. If you've read it, let me know what you think in the comments. It's okay if you don't agree with me. It's okay. So the other biblio adventures this week have been my YA book club. One of the books we discussed is Ducks by Kate Beaton. I talked about that in last week's Friday Reads. Everybody in the book club loved it. And the second book, Furia, I am going to be talking about today, so hang on for that. Skoden Readathon continues. That's the November Readathon that is this year hosted by Kim of Native Lady Book Warrior. Basically, everybody's encouraged to read books by Indigenous authors. I read 5 or 6 already this week, and I decided to do a separate video. It's probably going to go up tomorrow, focusing entirely on those Indigenous books. So what I've got for you today, I've got 7 books that are not by Indigenous authors. I'm going to start with nonfiction November. It's also a thing. And I'm going to end with my top pick out of these 7. All right. So first off, Inside of a Dog, What Dogs See, Smell, and Know. And it's by Alexandra Horowitz. This is the Young Readers edition. And I found out about it from a book I talked about last week, What a Mushroom Lives For by Michael Hathaway. And both of these books talk about Umwelt, which is how a being perceives the world. And in the example describing what Umwelt is in this book and in What a Mushroom Lives For, they use the same example, what the world would be like from a tick's point of view. It's one of the many great features in this book is in the notes at the back and sources. She lets us know that that comes from the Baltic German scientist Jacob von Uexküll, who came up with the idea or the word Umwelt. So there's a big glossary at the end of this book. There's notes and sources. There's a thorough index. I would say that it's for readers in grade 5 up to adult. I certainly found lots to engage with in it. And some of my big takeaways are that dogs are categorically different from wolves. And one of the false ideas that she talks about in here is that dogs treat humans as if they are part of a pack. Yeah, so you can read more about that and why it's not true. And another fascinating thing had to do with dogs having a theory of mind and how they can test that sort of thing. Alexandra Horowitz is a biological researcher, so she talks about how they can figure these things out, even though dogs can't talk to us. This book is kind of like a continuing series of me exploring Umwelt. Earlier this year, I read An Immense World by Yong, and next up, I have this, What It's Like to Be a Bird by David Allen Sibley. I can't wait to get to this. I'm starting it tomorrow. I just had to shift a bit because the sun is coming in. It's been about minus 17 or so for the past week, and warmer temperatures are coming, but we've also had some really bright sunshine in spite of the cold, and sometimes that makes filming a bit difficult. Anyway, next I'm going to tell you about 3 audiobooks that I listened to in this past week, starting with a YA book called A Scatter of Light by Malinda Lo. It's a queer standalone companion to her book Last Night at the Telegraph Club. Companion because there are a couple of minor characters in this story that are also in Last Night at the Telegraph Club. And I'm waiting for Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I'm on hold at the library. I haven't got it yet. I don't feel like I missed anything by not having read it first. A Scatter of Light is set in Marin County, California, in 2013 mostly, and the central character is 18 years old at that time. She was supposed to be spending the summer on the East Coast with her friends, and something happened. She got into trouble, so she's with her grandmother instead. Aria has a white grandmother and father, and her mother is Chinese, and she's an opera singer who's off singing in Europe. So what happens to Aria this summer is, first off, she meets Steph, her grandmother's gardener, who is genderqueer and lesbian, and meets a bunch of her lesbian friends, and Aria realizes that she is bisexual. So there's that coming out thing happening, and there are some kind of extended, very sensual sex scenes in it as she's learning about what it's like to have a woman as a lover. One of the questions that comes up that I think would make this book good for discussion is about relationships and whether or not they require work. I transcribed a section. It goes like this. I guess I was thinking about relationships and how much work they are, and 21 Love Poems is about how Adrienne Rich's relationship with another woman is a lot of work. You have to choose to be in the relationship because the rest of the world doesn't make it easy. The world is definitely not set up for queer relationships. And Aria says, I always thought that if you're in a relationship with someone, it could work on its own. You shouldn't have to force it. And the reply is, I don't think forcing anything is a good idea, but yeah, you have to work at it. So this reference to Adrienne Rich kind of caught my interest because coincidentally, when I was at the Vancouver Writers Fest, Elif Batman also talked about Adrienne Rich and how it made such a difference for her. And that's part of what's going on in this book as well. And another thing that struck me, now this is just a tiny detail, but Aria goes to this couple's apartment and she's noticing how run down everything is. And she says the white stove had electric burners, the black coils embedded in stained metal bowls. And 2013 and already an electric stove with metal coils is run down and old-fashioned. That's the kind of stove I have. Only 2 burners work properly. And the metal bowls underneath are so rusted, they're rusted right through in some places. My stove is a lot worse than the one that they're describing here. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And next up is another book by an Asian American, Nghi Vo, and it is the 3rd in the Singing Hills cycle. Into the Riverlands is the title. This is novella length in book form. The audio is only about 2 hours long. Nice palate cleanser. This one has a lot of martial arts in it. Asian fantasy, drawing heavily on Chinese legends and mythology. And the central character is a non-binary cleric. That's all 3 of them I recommend. And the 3rd audiobook is a translation from French. It is the Anomaly by Hervé Le Tellier, translated by Adriana Hunter, and the audiobook is read by Dominic Hoffman. Roz at Scallydandling about the books. She picked this as her favorite when the BookTube prize judging was going on. It was also the winner of the BookTube prize, and the original French edition won the Prix de Goncourt, a prestigious literary prize in France. The opening scene in it is about a contract killer, and if I hadn't watched that video that Roz did recommending it, I don't think I would have continued with it. But the story is told in pieces. There's lots of different elements, lots of different points of view, and even styles. It is a science fiction thriller puzzle. And there's this whole group of people. What they have in common is that they were all on the same airplane, the same flight from Paris to New York, and they end up getting doubled. So they have exact doubles, and yeah, so there's some sort of anomaly, and what happens to these people after that occurrence. It's a clever premise. The storytelling is cleverly done, and the ending is superb. Love the ending so much. I have to say that it reminded me of the podcast Welcome to Night Vale. That was the very first podcast I ever listened to, and I did listen to it religiously for a few years. But if you know that podcast, you'll know that there was a missing Delta flight 18713 that occasionally appears in this little desert town of Night Vale. It appears in the sky, disappears again. Anyway, I thought of that when I was reading The Anomaly. Next up is a book that I got on loan from my fitness trainer. When Leslie found out that I like to read, she said, "Oh, this is so good." It's Portrait of an Unknown Woman by Daniel Silva. It is number 22 in a series about Gabriel Allon. By the time we get to this book in the series, I haven't read any of the earlier ones. Anyway, Gabriel is now retired. He was the head of the intelligence agency of Israel. And now he is one of the top art restorers in the world. And it's the art angle that caught my interest, and this is why I agreed to read it, because I like reading about art. And in this case, it's art forgeries. So Gabriel is called upon to help solve what's going on with high-level art forgeries. To me, it's kind of like a mashup between Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code and Emily St. John Mandel's The Glass House and Antoine Wilson's Mouth to Mouth. In Mouth to Mouth, we see the use of art as a luxury commodity rather than something that you enjoy on your wall. In The Glass Hotel, there's a crime going on. Not to give spoilers, but it's not forgery in The Glass Hotel, but it's something similar. And Da Vinci Code in the style of writing, which is a style that drives me nuts. There are things that don't make sense, like right at the beginning, Gabriel is being followed by someone and he beats that person up and really injures his hand in doing so. Of course, he's also an expert at martial arts. He's an expert at everything, this Gabriel. And later on, it's still mentioned about his injured hand, but not when he's shaking hands with people. Suddenly his hand seems to be fine. The women in here are described as wearing either stretch jeans or stretch white trousers with form-fitting white tops or loose white tops, and one of the central characters is tall and beautiful with raven hair, and she always seems to forget to pack a bra. That joke got old fast. But I liked the bopping around Europe by train and by plane, Italy, France, Spain, England, and then over to New York. Oh yeah, the other infuriating thing. So Gabriel is married to Chiara, who is the daughter of the head rabbi in Venice, and that's where they've settled now that he's retired. And he comes home for lunch every day for sex. They have a very active sex life, these old people. Kind of makes me roll my eyes, but the very best part is actually the author's afterword, where he talks about art forgery and how in the great museums of the world there are probably forgeries hanging on the wall. Of course, the character, Gabriel, he can tell just by looking at a painting that it's a forgery or not, whereas the experts, you know, even when they, you know, do all of the kinds of special examining that they do, it's hard for them to tell. Anyway, it's all in fun. Took me a while to get through it. It's a big one, and I just kept setting it aside to read other things. But it did remind me of when I read Da Vinci Code. When it first came out, I was working at a farm in France. It was also a B&B. And I had about 100 pages to go in the book. And then I was going on a side trip for a week and then coming back to the farm. And I asked the hosts to hold on to the book, not to loan it out to somebody else until I came back, because I wanted to finish it. But I didn't want to bring it with me because there was only a little bit left, and I wanted something that was going to last me for the whole week. And they were amazed, these two guys, a gay couple that are running the bed and breakfast. They were originally from the UK. They said, how can you just stop? Don't you want to know what's going to happen? And I'm like, yeah, I was kind of curious, but the thrillers aren't for me. And the writing was so bad that was part of the entertainment for me. Anyway, if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. So there's that. So this was for my YA book club, Furia, by Yamile, Saied, Méndez. And the central character, her name is Camilla. On the soccer pitch, she has the nickname La Furia, because she is on fire. She's 17 years old. She lives in Rosario, Argentina, a city I had no knowledge of whatsoever until I read this book, and now I feel like I really got a sense of the place. Keep having to run away from the sun. So, Camilla, she has mixed heritage, Russian, Andalusian, Palestinian, and African. And the story opens with a proverb: lies have short legs. Very applicable, because Furia is keeping the fact that she is playing on a competitive women's soccer league a secret from her parents. It's the thing that she cares about the most, and yet she has a pretty good idea that her parents will not approve. And in fact, earlier, it's not the case at the time that this is taking place, which is contemporary, but at one time it was illegal for girls to play football. And there are other social issues that are very much in the foreground here. The issue of feminism and missing and murdered women, lesbian relationships. Furia herself is not a lesbian, but some people on her team are. And there's a passage here. Roxana wrapped an arm around my shoulders. When the warmth of her body grounded me, I realized I'd been shaking again. Georgina and Laura eyed us suspiciously from the hallway. The year before, 2 girls in the class below us had been caught kissing in the bathroom, and ever since there had been a hunt for the gays, as Roxana called it. Our country had legalized same-sex marriage way before the US, but prejudice didn't read or obey laws. It was a hard weed to pull from people's hearts. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but A Scatter of Light by Malinda Lo, I didn't say that it's set in 2013, but the passage of the gay marriage bill in the US is actually an important setting in that book. I'm not particularly a soccer fan, but this is the kind of book that really helps me to understand why, for some people, soccer is a great sport. I know the World Cup is happening this month in Qatar, and I've seen mention of it on BookTube. I read a book a while back by Harsha Walla called Border and Rule, where she talks about the treatment of migrant laborers in Qatar, building those stadiums where these games will be played, air-conditioned soccer stadiums, and that issue of migrant labor and how they're treated in Qatar, as well as the environmental aspect of having air-conditioned sports stadiums, are reasons why there is currently a boycott going on to do with World Cup. I would say that a book I read quite a while ago, Soccer in Sun and Shadow by the Uruguayan author Eduardo Galeano, has really opened my eyes to the sport of soccer, and when it's being played for the love of the game, as is described in here, it can truly be a beautiful thing. It's a long book. At my book club, the other members didn't like it as well as I did. I also found the first half pretty slow. It wasn't till about, I don't know, 150 pages in, or even halfway in, where this was the book I wanted to read. You know, I have concurrent books all of the time, but sometimes when a book really captures my interest, then I will just keep reading that book until it's done. And that's what happened with Furia. So it ended up being a 4-star read. And last of all, 5-star read by Canadian cartoonist Jessica Campbell, and the title is Rave. This is autobiographical fiction based on the author's life. She grew up in a evangelical Christian church in Victoria, British Columbia. So the setting is late 90s, early 2000s. You can see what the computers are like. Her artwork is all black and white, bold shapes. Here's the end papers. And the central character is Lauren. I think she's 17 years old, and she's been assigned to work on a school project with Mariah, who is Wiccan. So she introduces Lauren to other ideas, other ways of looking at the world. And in fact, Lauren gets involved in a relationship with another girl, but of course her religious upbringing makes her feel really guilty about that. think it's explored quite well in here. A lot of times when we see Lauren, she's merely watching and we don't know what she's thinking. So this book asks the reader to put yourself in Lauren's place as an observer. And there are some very funny parts. There's also some very poignant parts. In an interview that I read, Jessica Campbell said there are lines in here that she remembers people saying when she was growing up. One of them is this boy who says that when he gets married, he wants to have lots of kids, one every 9 months. She said, I feel sorry for your wife. In another section, there's a Christian rave. This is one of the few big spreads in the book. Mostly they're in panels like this, very regulated, as the church regulates behavior. And here is something that they're told when they're at this rave. And girls, our Lord put you on earth to act as servants to the Lord first, then your fathers, then to your husbands. When you dress and act provocatively, you are not serving your masters. You are committing adultery against your future husbands. I thought this is just fantastic. And I really appreciated the narrative arc where we can see Lauren learning how to think for herself. I love this. Recently there was a art show at the Art Gallery of Alberta that was all comic artists of Canada. And Jessica Campbell was in that show, and there was a free chapbook giveaway. This is one called Chicago Works, and it uses the text of this artist, Emily Carr, together with Jessica Campbell's artwork. And so that is Emily Carr on the cover. And if you open it up, we have, I love that kind of art playfulness. It's the same kind of art on the inside as you'd see in Rave. That's it for me today. Please come back tomorrow if you want to hear about Indigenous authored books, and stick around for a minute if you are missing my little dog, Joni, and her cuteness. Thanks so much for watching.